Welcome to Sunlit Brushstrokes. Today we will be sketching these sweet little wildflowers in watercolored pencil. I'll walk you step by step through this process and show you how I sketch my flowers, then add water and blend the colors together. Finally, I'll show you techniques for adding extra detail and life to these mini florals. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so for our wildflowers and our playful flowers that we're going to do today, I have a sketchbook. This is actually a watercolor sketchbook, or it can be, I guess you could say, mixed medium sketchbook. It works really well for if you're going to do something without a lot of layering. I wouldn't do any like watercolor pieces that are going to have a lot of layers applied to them the way that I do some of my work. But it's perfect for something with watercolor pencil because you can work quickly and use a little bit of water, and it tends to work well to use something that's a lighter weight. The other benefit of a sketchbook is, of course, you can take it with you. The other thing I have here is some small pieces of watercolor paper. These are Canson XL, and I've cut them into smaller sizes. The thing I like about using small sizes like this is that you can, if they turn out, then you can go ahead and use them in a card, or I should say on a card. I have some examples of kind of loose, messy paintings I've done on smaller pieces of paper before, and then I've used them on my card covers. And so that's an option you can do if you want, and just go ahead, skip the sketchbook idea altogether and just cut yourself some small pieces of watercolor paper. And again, this is cheaper paper. It's not Arches, because we're not layering. There's actually another benefit to using paper without as much texture, is that sometimes the watercolor pencils can end up leaving a little bit of their texture as they kind of go over the bumpy surface of, say, Arches cold press. So having a smoother paper is actually quite nice for watercolor pencils, but not necessary. It's just nice. So maybe what I'll do is I'll do some of my sketches on here, and then I'll go ahead and do some in here afterwards. I also have my watercolor pencils here. These are the Staedtler watercolor pencils that I've used in the past. I'll include a link below. But there's definitely a lot of watercolor pencils that you can get that work beautifully, and you definitely don't have to use the same brand as me. So why don't we go ahead and maybe start with a purple Aster. It's kind of like a daisy with a little bit of a yellow, golden yellow center in it. So I'm going to grab my purple pencil, my yellow pencil, and I'm just going to sketch a quick daisy here, or maybe a few daisies. So I'm going to do the center first. And the fun thing about this is it's almost like sketching. It's just you can add water at the end. So I'm going to do a few centers, and I'm just looking at my pencils. I don't have anything that's a light purple. The dark purple I'm going to have to be somewhat careful with that I don't overdo, but I'm going to just try that. If you have a softer, lighter purple, go ahead and use it. So I'm just going to go ahead and go around the center of this little Aster, kind of making these little skinny petals. Whoops. Trying to keep the idea of kind of like, you know, a wagon wheel or something like that. Spokes of a tire, that everything's kind of just originating from the center of the flower. And this one I'm kind of doing a little bit more face on. I'm thinking that's a little bit weird looking, but that's okay. We're just practicing. And this one I'm going to do the petals in the front shorter so that it looks like it's a little bit more curved. I should have done the center of the daisy maybe a little bit smaller, but that's okay. We're just having fun today, and we're doing simple things. So okay, I'm gonna call that good enough. And which way do I want to go with this one? I think I'm going to kind of do the same sort of thing where I'm making things a little bit shorter at the front again. Maybe give the impression that it's a little bit sideways. And as I said, this purple is probably, you know, maybe not the best purple ever, but I don't have a light purple in this particular set. I do have some light purples, but I'm wanting to stick with the colors that have the colors that come in the 24 set, in case that is what you decide to go buy. I don't want to use colors that I'm not also recommending, but there's definitely, you can definitely get soft pastel colors. And with watercolor pencil, you are going to be able to mingle and mix your colors. So it makes it that you really don't need so many colors, but sometimes it's nice to have them just as options. So I went ahead and added this kind of mauvey color. It's number 61 on top of my purple, which was number 6, if you are following along with my colors. And then I will go ahead and do some leaves really quickly here and stems. And then we'll add the water to everything at the end. And just going to do something simple for these little leaves. Right. Oh, and then I think I'm going to go ahead and use one of these golden colors to do the center of this flower. Let's zoom in here so you can see. I'm going to do a little bit of this little up and down, little jagged little things. And sometimes I'll even kind of create a little bit of a C shape, if you will. I'll try and leave one section of my yellow that's almost like a highlight. So I'm just going to go around and just do little scribbles up and down. If you have a reference photo you want to use, you can go ahead and use that as well, or you can just follow along with me. And I might even throw this one on here. Sorry, so that the golden color was number 16. This one is, sorry, get it the right way, it's 73. I'm just going to put a tiny little bit of it towards this side. I'm going to say this is my shadow side, so I'm just adding a little bit. And I used the two purples, kind of the pinky purple and just the plain purple, just so that I had a little bit of variety. All right. And they're very pastel, but when we get water on there, they're going to come to life. So which one should we do next? Let's go ahead and do some bluebells. Now, again, I don't have the perfect blue going here, so I'll probably do a mixture of, well, actually, let's try this one. This is number 3. It's a lot darker than we need, so I'll maybe use a combination. Oh, maybe number 30 and number 3. We'll see. Like I say, I don't have the perfect blue here for a bluebell, but it's kind of, bluebells have a little bit more of a periwinkle color, don't they? So we can always mix a little bit of purple into here. I'm just going to start by just doing these little bells first. I'm just doing pretty rough, random little bells. I want to kind of get a little bit of a look like they're not perfectly aligned with each other. I'm going to go ahead and put the stem on, and then I will decide how many more of these little bells I want to add. Sorry about that. Move my page down a little bit. I'm using number 56 just because it's my favorite green for starting out with. I can always add darker greens later, but I really like this one. So I'm going to go ahead and make a few more on this stem. And do a few little leaves here. And then, yeah, I think I want a few more little bluebells up here. Do I like that? I think that's a little bit random. I'm not 100% happy with that, but that's okay. This is just going to be a fun, easy exercise, so we don't have to be perfect. And back to my green. I'm going to give these little leaves a place here and help them attach to our stems. Yeah, that's okay. Not perfect, but it's okay. All right, and these ones have some interesting leaves, so I'm going to just go ahead and just quickly kind of sketch some in here. How do I want to do this one? Maybe like that. I think that's a little bit random weird. Oh well. I'm going to make this one like it's folded over. And I'm just adding some of these kind of veins, but more or less the direction of the way the veins are going in these leaves. You know what? I'm going to zoom out because I noticed that I keep cutting off here. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Sorry, guys. Okay, I'm going to quickly fill this one in with just a little bit of our blue here. So this is still number 30. I never ended up picking up the number 3 again. I'm kind of thinking I'm just going to go jump into the purple. So I went ahead and made the shaded side on the left, since that's what I did over there. We're just going to pretend that the sun is coming from the right. And I'm just going to put a little bit of purple just softly on here so that they kind of, when I add water, we have a little bit of a bluey purple that's a little bit more periwinkle. And slapping a little bit, but okay. We're going to call that good enough for those, and then maybe I will throw a little bit, let's go ahead and throw some of the other greens in. I'm thinking maybe number 5. I'm going to make it a little bit darker at the base. And I'll darken these stems a little bit too. I don't want to overdo it because I find this green is a bit intense, but I'll just throw a little bit of it on there. and definitely underneath of here because we're going to have a shadow happening because the leaf is curled over, and so underneath where the curve happens is going to be more shaded, right? So I'll fill that in and then just do a little bit of this on here. And again, we can always add a little bit more color after. I don't want to overdo it so far. So that's our bluebell. Okay, now I'm sketching a wild rose. I have put this one on time lapse because, as it turns out, when I went to blend the colors on this particular rose later on, I managed to accidentally work outside the range of the camera. So what I've done is I'm going to later on sketch this rose again, and you're going to be able to watch me step by step from the sketching to the coloring to the wetting and blending. So just keep watching and you're going to be able to see a complete wild rose later on. Okay, let's go on to another flower. Which one should we do next? Maybe we could do some clover. Let's do that. So I am going to use this pink color and just do some, maybe I'll do my stems first. Let's do that first this time. So these are going to be the kind of the center of the clover where, you know, all the petals are going to kind of branch off from. Should we have maybe 5? Let's do 5 since we have 3 up there. Let's do 5 of these this time. Try to figure out where we're going to throw one. Maybe like that. I don't know. Might be a little bit off balance, but we can always kind of throw in some leaves over here. Sometimes you can see all 3 leaves on the clover. Sometimes they just kind of have more. You can almost just see kind of a round leaf. And I'm not being, oops, I'm wanting to put the clover there. I'll probably erase that because I might run out of space. Let's do that quick. I've got my kneadable eraser, but you could even have a firmer eraser than that if you wanted. Let's get these little petals on before I make no more room for them. Fill it with leaves. That would be kind of defeating the purpose. Okay, so I'm just doing these little round, almost like, I don't know, what would you call those? They're kind of a half curl, but they're tall. Might be overdoing it on that one. Okay, I'm gonna make this one kind of go behind the leaf since I've kind of filled that leaf already. Again, just doing really loose, simple curls here. All right, and now we can add maybe just a few more leaves to fill things in now that we know where all of our flowers are actually going to be. And again, I'm being pretty loose and simplistic here, but maybe we can curve something over here and just add a few more leaves there. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and do a couple more flowers on these little pieces of paper, and then I'll go and wet everything at the end. All right, the next 2 I want to do are some yarrow and some fireweed, which we have here. And the first, I think with the fireweed, I'm going to start by just doing some of these stems in the center, and then I'll add, you know, some little pink flowers on the stems after. And I might as well go ahead and get the leaves on here. Now these are things that are local or native to Alberta. I don't know. I'd be interested to know where in the world you're from and what are the wildflowers you think of from where you live. These are the ones that I'm thinking of, but I am sure that, well, the other funny thing is, right, sometimes what's a weed in one place is actually a flower in another. So these are really a wildflower, probably they're considered fireweed, but they're pretty. All right, so the top is just very much like these are tiny little buds. They're not open yet, so I'm just going to do these little tiny dot things. And then as I work my way down the stem, I'm going to try and, you know, kind of broaden these a little bit, give them a little bit of a little flower shape. Don't worry if you have all 5 petals on them. You could just make some on the side, so you can only see 3 or 4 of the petals, but we're definitely going to try and create a little bit of bulk as we work our way down here. And I'm just going to kind of jump in randomly, and then I'll come in and fill those spots after where it needs them. I probably won't need them everywhere because, you know, wildflowers aren't perfectly groomed or anything. I already think I've gotten a little bit too symmetrical here. I'll just throw a few little odd petals kind of poking out here and there so it looks a little bit more random. That's not too bad. And then I'll just go ahead and do the same thing over here. Again, starting at the top with just tiny little things, kind of like buds. And then I will try and give the impression of flowers as I come down. And you can definitely do these, you know, larger on a larger piece of paper. That would actually be probably more interesting because these are just kind of so tiny that you almost can't make out what flower this is, right? But I still think they're kind of pretty. You could almost just do scribbling stems too. I'll show you that in a sec if you decide you want to do something that's just a little bit more abstract. I'm going to make the flowers come a little bit further down on this one into the stem just because they were all almost ending at the same spot, and I didn't like that. Is that okay? Maybe like that. We'll see. We're just playing. I'll just show you an example of one where you could actually be even like, I don't know what flower to call this, so you can name it what you think it looks like. And I will start with some stems. Again, maybe 2 or 3. And again, I might not even be doing the leaves that would match this. So I'm just taking a little bit of artistic license and I'm just almost inventing a flower. But you could, if you have an idea what you would want to call this flower, like I'm thinking even lupins, which we don't have here. Like at least they're not wild. As far as I know, I've never seen them wild. So I'm going to grab some of this same color again, and I'm going to come down with purple as I go. But you guys tell me what you think. So I'm just almost scribbling in like these little balls. So it's a little bit less, even less detailed than that one. Just working my way down the stem, a little bit running off of the stem here. Okay, let's make this one shorter. Almost like little balls and dots. Super, super simple. And then I'm going to grab my purple. Oh, and the color I've been using this whole time, both for the Fireweed and this one, was the number 61 or the mauve color. And I'm just adding a little bit of purple kind of towards the bottom and the center of that. Let's move on. All right, so for the Yarrow, I might pick some different colors because I've already used quite a bit of that, kind of the pinks already today. So I'm going to pick kind of a red-orange, a yellow, orange. Do we want any pink? Maybe I'll add a little bit. I'll see how much pink to add. And I'm going to kind of come and do these almost like they're on side profiles. So I'm just kind of scribbling around just to kind of get the whole mass of flowers here. And maybe one over here. Again, I'm just scribbling, and maybe one here. This can be our third one, and I'm going to call that good. Make it come down a little bit more. And then I'm going to grab my orange and make some of them a little bit more orangey. This one can be a little bit more orangey. And I'm just really just scribbling these little circles. There's nothing special that I'm doing. What I'm aiming for is just to kind of get the basic shape of the flower, kind of all the little flowers as a whole mass, just kind of getting them sort of the shape that they would be. And these are on side profile the way I'm drawing them, so they're kind of oblong looking. picking my yellow again. Oh, and my colors for this one. Sorry, I told you. Terrible at this. Number 1 for the yellow, 4 is the orange, 2 is the red orange, and then I've got my pink, which I may or may not use. And the pink is number 20. I'm going to make this one a little bit more on the red orange side now. And if you guys don't find it very helpful for me to tell you the numbers, just let me know, because honestly, it's not like it's necessarily natural for me to read you the numbers, but if it's helpful for you and you're following along with the exact same pencils, then of course I want to tell you the numbers so that you can know what I'm doing. Okay, this one I'm really messing up here. Let's just start getting some stems in before I make a bigger mess. Okay. So I'm attaching all the little flowers to one stem. I'm doing that again over here. Just loosely, not being overly perfectionistic about it. Maybe I need a little bit of something over here. And then I will do some leaves, and these ones are kind of interesting. They almost look like fern leaves, don't they? So I'll just do a few of these, and then I'll come in and do like little leaves onto them. So maybe one back here. Maybe that. Okay, let's try this. Again, these are just fun and simple. Scribbling. And sometimes my leaves are really not the most realistic here. If you have a reference photo that you're using and you just want to kind of follow it a little bit more, you can absolutely do that too and actually get some drawing practice. This is, I would call, just more fun. It's still practice, but if you really want to work on your, say, your realistic drawing skills, this is probably not the best project for that. I will show you some projects for that another day. Okay. Sorry, I'm throwing in some of this reddish pinky color, and this is number 23. Okay, I think that's good enough. So we actually ended up with 7 flowers here today. You know what? I'm going to throw just a tiny bit more purple and make these a little bit more blobby. A little bit more exciting. They're a little bit boring looking. Again, you can tell I'm just scribbling. Okay. Now it's time to add the water. Oh, actually it's not. I need to throw a little bit of that dark green in a few spots quickly. Now I'm going to grab the number 3 to do that. And just, I don't know, kind of do the centers of these just a little bit. Nothing fancy. I just think it's nice to have more than one color on the go sometimes. I know this green is kind of intense anyway, so I can't say I really love it. You know what? I might just leave that one be as it is. The other thing, I will show you how you can kind of add some greens as you go. I'll just do a little bit to some of these. So there is a trick for adding color as you add your water, so we are not without options. Maybe I'll just put a teeny weeny little bit in the center up here. Not much. I do like this kind of more limey green, and I think that's pretty. So I think the lime green kind of goes nicely with the colors of this yarrow here. Okay, let's add some water. Now you have 2 options for your water. You could use one of these water brushes that I mentioned in another video. You could use that, or you can just use a regular paintbrush, whatever you would prefer. So maybe what I'll do is I'll do a little bit of both so that you can kind of see how I would go about using it. But I honestly, I don't work with these all that much. They're just convenient if you're, say, on the go and you don't want to have to bring, say, a jar of water with you. Why don't I start with the Yarrow? Let's do that first since it's right here. And I think that would be a good one to use a water brush. So I'll use the water brush on it, and then I will go from there. Now I've got a piece of paper towel with me so that I can kind of like dab as I go, because sometimes, especially if you're trying to avoid using water, so I'll avoid using my water pot for right now, or my water jar, and fill this in with water. And I want you to be able to see how I kind of wipe it and how I would work if I didn't have access to water and I was just using the water brush. So I want to make sure I'm not like sopping wet, and then I'll come in and I'm going to start with my lightest first. I'm just kind of bouncing it around a little bit to get the yellows wet, and then I'm going to wipe it off frequently as I go. I didn't really have to wipe it off quite yet, but then I work my way into the dark. So I'm kind of going from my yellows into my darker colors, and I'm just letting those mingle. And then I'll wipe my brush before I touch my greens. And you can really decide, do you want to do the greens and get them wet at the same time as this? Because the greens then will run a little bit into your Yarrow, which is totally fine. But if you prefer not, then you can just wait and wet the leaves at the end. So I'm going to bounce around, starting in the light side and then working my way to the dark side. And you can kind of also make that decision. If you need more darks, you can add them later when your paper is dry. Okay, so in this case, I'll probably wipe my brush a little bit, just get some of that paint off so that I am not going right in and getting all my darker colors at the top of the Yarrow on this one, unless that's what you want. If you want more of that color, you can. But I would just say kind of be conscious of working from light to dark. If you just kind of smear really fast and with too much water, you'll lose all the details you just achieved. So I'm going to come down here and just dampen this. And you can kind of control the water on here too based on how often you dry your water brush. Just kind of moistening the little leaves. I don't want to go overly wet with these ones because I want to sort of maintain a little bit of that shape that I was able to create, kind of the fern look, you know what I'm saying, with all the teeny little leaves. And I kind of tried to scribble the impression of leaves, if that makes sense. So I don't want to overly wet these, but there are situations where I would probably even add more water if I want a little bit more of a watercolor look and feel to this. So I'll just go around and wet it and call that good for that one. And yeah, you can see how that worked with the water brush. It worked totally fine. Why don't I do one of these with the paintbrush, and you can then you can compare and see what you think you prefer. You can definitely experiment too. Like I said, I think the water brush is perfect for traveling. So I'm going to grab myself my number 6 brush here and my water. I'll just moisten my brush. Let's move this over so that we don't create a shadow. Maybe I'll move my sketchbook out of the way for a sec. We'll bring it in a second. Okay, so dabbing it off, and I'm just going to work my way down. Again, you can decide how much water you want to add. If you're really after having a little bit more of a flowing look, you can do that, and then just re-moisten your brush, dab it off, keep working your way down. And the amount of water you apply is going to really be up to you, and it's going to change the look of this. So this one I'm working kind of dry, but maybe I'll go over here and do the next one a little bit wet so you can see the difference it makes if you're wet versus dry. So just moving that around. Okay, let's do this one a little bit wetter this time. I'm going to add more water to it and let that water kind of bleed around. And you can kind of see I've got a blurrier effect that I have happening here. It looks a little bit more like watercolor, but both options are really quite pretty. So you can really go with what you prefer. And part of it's, yes, more water, and part of it's just more kind of like almost scrubbing, if you will. I'm mushing things around more when I'm doing it this way. So the first one I was a little bit more controlled, used a little less water, tried to stay more or less on my shapes. And then these ones, I'm kind of just like mushing things around, letting myself go out of the lines, just messier, but it's pretty. Both options are pretty. So there's not a right or wrong for how much water you add or don't add. It's really a personal preference. So I'm Go ahead, fill these in. Again, I'm using a little more water than I think I was using on my last one. Okay, so let's move on to these other shapes. Now, really, there's not much to it. I'm just repeating everything that I've just been showing you. There's really not any major method to my madness here. Let's just do the water brush again with more water so you can see the water brush with more water. So I'm going to just drown it a little bit. I'm squeezing it. Whoa. I squeezed it a little bit hard that time. You can see that puddle that just happened. So this is actually a good place to do the extra water is on the Canson XL paper because it's 140 pounds, just a little bit more to it than my sketchbook, my water, whatever, it's mixed media sketchbook, I guess. And you can see I really blurred that out, and the green is even mixing in there, which you have to be cautious. If you over scrub your green and your purple together, you'll get muddy colors. However, it can be pretty if you just kind of, like I say, don't overdo it. Okay, I did not have to dip in there. I could have just wiped it. Because again, you just squeeze, if you need more water, you just squeeze the brush. So there's really no need to be dipping in your water at all if you're using a water brush. If you start getting kind of muddy colors, just wipe your brush off on paper towel. And yeah, it would be perfect for traveling because you can just have this filled with water. I mean, I don't know, there's probably situations you'd want to have that empty and fill it with water when you get to your destination. But fill this with water and have your watercolor pencils and you're good to go. Okay, I'm liking this. Again, it's very sloppy, very messy, but they're just so pretty. And these would look very pretty on a card. You could just use a little bit of cardstock and layer. That's what I do. I try and find colors of cardstock that kind of work with the painting or even contrast the painting. And then I layer it and turn it into a birthday card or thank you card, whatever. Now, I wanted to show you one thing too. I do like the color combinations there, so maybe I'll show you in a different one. I wanted to show you what you can do if you decide you want to use a little bit more of, say you wanted a darker green. So you're like, ooh, that's really lime and that's just not enough color. I actually really like the lime green on this one. You know what? But I'm going to show you because I just want to show you how you can use this. You can take either of your brushes. You can use the water brush or a regular paintbrush and just kind of gently rub the top of your watercolor pencil like this, and then take it and paint with it. I'm quite dry. The tips of this brush are quite dry, but you can go ahead and paint with it. And then I'm going to grab my paper towel and kind of get some of it off because I have more than I need. I'm squeezing this a little bit to help clean it. And then I can just use the water and just kind of blur that around. So that's one other way if you discovered you needed more color on it after you've already gone ahead and wet it. I would not use your pencil directly on wet paper. If you want to add more color with the pencil, I dry your thing first, then add the color directly on here with the pencil. Or while it's wet, you can do the method I just showed you where you actually just scrape the paint right off here. That's just more gentle to the paper because it's pretty rough to like actually take the pencil and try and dig it onto the wet paper. Wet paper is just more fragile, right? So that would be what I would do. And I don't like that as much. Like I said, I really like the lime green, and I think what I just did with my leaf shapes is kind of crazy and weird. So I don't like that as much, but all right, let's go ahead and get that sketchbook and quickly paint these ones. And I want to show you what I would do if I'm wanting to leave some areas of my painting kind of more white. So I'm gonna start this using the water brush. Like I said, you can really use either, but I'm gonna start on the light side of these little blue bells. Let's go over here so I don't drag my hand through it. So I'm kind of just gently, almost like massaging that pencil a little bit, and then I'm working my way into the dark side, and I'll move it around. So I started in the lights and worked to the dark so that I didn't get, lose the dark side and then blur too much of my color around and kind of just flatten it, if that makes sense. So, and I'm not washing my brush each time or rinsing it because I don't mind having a little bit of this purple blue color kind of transferring from one to the other. I just want to keep the darks on the dark side. That's why I'm starting on the light side, and then I work my way into the dark. And doing the same thing on each of these. And I'm getting a little bit of that light green kind of color mixing in, which I think is actually pretty. I think that gives it more of that watercolor look. And you can decide if you want to wait for this to fully, like these little bells, to completely dry before you wet the green, or you can go ahead and wet the green right away And there's more likelihood that you're going to have the green kind of mingle a bit more with the actual bluebell, which if you're wanting a watercolor look, that's pretty. You can see that happening a little bit there. I like that. So again, as I'm working, sometimes I'm squeezing my water brush a little bit and sometimes not so much. You can kind of control the water by kind of the amount of squeeze that you use. It'll come out even if you don't squeeze it. Like if you just rub, the water it'll come out on its own as well. Ooh, I'm being a bit sloppy there. I really like that lime green there, even though it's a very kind of warm, almost yellowy green. It's also sort of a neutral green, a little bit on the olive side, which I think is quite pretty. These ooh, okay, I'm really going wild there. I'll just dab that off a bit. Anyway, these pencils, I think these are a nice starter set because they have such a range of bold, vibrant colors that you can use to layer or mix or blend with. But then if you find that there's some colors that maybe you're mixing often, you're neutralizing often, and you would rather be able to, take a shortcut, I think that's a good time to consider building out your pencil set. Personally, I think it's not a bad idea to just go with open stock because you can just end up getting the colors that you're after. If you have a local art store in your area that sells open stock watercolor pencils, that's a nice option. Okay, I'm trying to leave a little bit of a gap there so I don't just mush that dark green into here. I want to keep the kind of the variation happening so you can tell this is folded over. Some people like buying just really large sets of watercolor pencils or even color pencils, and that's great. I do have quite a number myself. I just find there's a lot of colors I don't use very often, and then there's other colors I use all the time. So that's why I kind of think it's nice to be able to just buy open stock pencils to supplement your basic range of colors with. But it's a totally individual thing, and you can just do what works for you. I just have a bad habit, don't I, of always starting on the right side when I'm painting, and then just do that all the time. Let's try it. I'm going to try and keep my hand down here and I'll do this and I'll wet this. So I'm starting in the light side. This has got a bit of green on it. Not so great. Let's wash this off. I'm going to actually wash it in my water and see if that helps. I think sometimes it can just stain, and that might be all that's happened now because it's not really coming off on my paper towels. I'll just say it's stained. And I'm starting kind of in the lights again. Ooh, it's pouring out. And working my way into the darks. And you can see, wow, that got way more intense by adding water, didn't it? It's gorgeous once you add the water. And then I'm just going to kind of come in here, and if you want to let the centers dry first, you can, so that things don't chance blurring around. The yellow, you really don't want the yellow in your purple necessarily, but just be careful. And I'm just kind of wetting this. And in some ways, this is almost like when I was a child, they had, like kids kind of like coloring books where they already had paint, almost like pigment right on the page, and all you had to do was paint with water. I don't know if you guys ever saw those, but in my day, that's the thing. And it's almost what this is like doing, except you're being in control. You're deciding how much water you apply where. You've already decided what colors are going to be where and how you blend them. So there's just a lot more thought that goes into it, but it does remind me of using those little books. Like I said, they were like a coloring book with pigment on them already. Going to go ahead and I do like the fact we have both purples here, like the mauve purple and the dark purple. I think this is making a little bit more true to the colors that are within the asters. And because we did it so light, that's also helping. Had we been really heavy-handed, these would have been really dark. I'm just filling these in. I like these. These are pretty. I'd like to know what you guys think of watercolor pencils. Do you guys, would you like to see more? I've actually done paintings that are more in depth than this with these. Like, these are simple ways to use watercolor pencils, but you can actually get some pretty amazing effects with watercolor pencils, or even colored pencils for that matter. I'll have to do a survey one day and find out what people really want. Okay, I'm just filling this in, and this is, I've only used the kind of the lime green here, so we can decide if we want to add another green. I am thinking maybe if I add anything, I'll be adventuresome and try something besides the green we've been using. I think we could use something else. What else could we use here? I'm going to try something a little bit more adventuresome. I have my dark green, which is 38, and my kind of brown color, which is 73. And I'm going to see what happens if I take a little bit of both colors off and just throw them onto my leaves here, see what I think. Okay, I've got a lot of brown there, so I'll grab a bit more of the green. This is just an experiment. You may not want to follow me into this, but I don't know, what do you guys think? It was better before I started to do this. It's kind of a nice olive green that I'm getting there, and now I'm like running into my petals, but yeah, I'm getting a little too wet. And these aren't exactly accurate, are they, for these little, I gotta change the shape. This isn't exactly the way these leaves are supposed to look. Kind of a little too rounded. I don't know. You can see though that you can blend colors right on your page if you needed to, or on your little brush. I'm just going back and forth between the two because, as you can tell, sometimes I'm going a little too wild with the brown color, and then other times I'm a little bit too wild with the green. Actually, for the most part, I'm happy with the greens. It's the brown I can get a little bit overboard with, but that's making a difference. I do like these colors. I'm so partial to my greens being muted. Yes, I like that color. I don't know. I definitely have things running goofy there. I've got way too much water here. I'll just try and lift it. And this is another thing you can do and be aware of course, is that if you're not wanting colors to run into each other, in other words, you've got this beautiful purple and it's wet, don't go in there with the greens and the browns until this is dry, and then it won't run into them. All right, I was going to town jabbering away while I painted that and didn't realize I was running off the page. So I'm going to do another one on this smaller piece of paper, and that actually will be good because you'll be able to see how I can maybe simplify this, because I felt like when I drew it the first time I wasn't being as simplistic as I could have been. So, center of our flower, and then I'm going to go ahead and do all these little stamens around it. Almost look like we've got a little donut here or something. I'll come in with my darks after, and yes, let's go ahead and make this a simpler wild rose. So we're just going to try and keep this as a simple 5-petal flower here, and I'm not going to be as persnickety with how I'm going to kind of place, that's going to be about there. I want to get this one that's a little bit more on its side so that we can kind of see some of these, slightly turned, I should say, where you can kind of see the underside of like the petals curling over. So I'll just try and simplify it this time and do like a messy petal. Again, these roses kind of have messy petals, so don't have to be perfectly round. I think they look better when you try and avoid being perfectly round. This one's almost too round in my opinion, but I'll just leave it like that. Yeah, good enough. And then I'm just going to come around the edges quickly as we did before. Like I say, I don't want to go too slow either. I don't want to be super slow because I've already kind of showed you how to color this, but I did want to simplify the drawing process. So I'll just speed things up while I go ahead and color it. I'm putting most of the color on the outside of this, and then I will add the shadows. Okay, so I'm going to be darker here because this is where I'm going to say that the shadow is being cast, because again, our sunlight was over here, and I'm going to put some under here because we could say this leaf is casting a shadow here, but again, I'm getting a little bit complex with my shadows and I don't want to do that. I want to keep this simple. So don't be too complex about your shadows on this one, because we're just having fun. We're keeping things simple. We can Put a little bit of thought into where we put our shadows, but okay, I'm gonna call that good. And then I'm just gonna kind of jump in with my two browns again. This was my golden one, and do this little C thing and do these little lines. Attach the stamens to the center of the flower. Whoops, went a little bit wild there with my curls, but that's okay. These can be a little bit wild at times. Okay, we're gonna call that good enough. It's sloppier than my last one. And you can grab whatever greens you want. I'm gonna grab the 38 and 16 and just quickly draw in some leaves with them. And I'm changing the way I did my leaves here than compared to what I did earlier, but I'm just going to use these colors, and I'm going to actually just overlap them. I'll show you what I mean in a sec with the gold color, and maybe I'll be able to get some colors I'm a little bit happier with, because no, what is your guys' opinion? What are your favorite greens? Do you guys share my thoughts on neutral greens, or do you prefer bright greens? I'd like to know that, actually. Am I alone in my, or how alone am I in my neutral green thing? Maybe that's the question. Okay, this leaf I did kind of weird. Okay, maybe that's enough leaves for that one. And I'm just going to come in here and go on top of some of it with my golden color. And this is where you can mix colors if you want, but you don't have to, right? You don't have to mix colors. You could definitely use your bright intense green as is. I just was trying to tone that down, and I might go ahead and even throw a little bit of this color in the centers of these, just so that when I add my water to my green, it kind of dulls it down. Yeah, I'm really going after my dull greens obsessively. So yeah, if you wanted to do what we did on our first one, just use your number 5 green, skip doing what I did with the two, you know, the gold and the darker green. I just thought maybe I can make this work, that I can get duller colors. And I'm just coming in now with my light olive green, which is number 56, same one we used earlier, and just filling this in really quickly. I'm going to leave a little bit of light in a few spots, or just blank spots where I can let the water kind of mingle around. And I just skipped doing the shadows this time, make it simple. Okay, let's grab our water. And again, we can use either one. We can use our brush, our water brush pen, or we can use our regular brush. Either way is totally good. I'm going to fill in the pinks first, I should say fill in my whites first with water, and then work my way into my pinks so that they blend. I can always do a few strokes downward, come in from light side first and then into the dark side, and then I can pull some downwards. Light first, and I'm going to be careful I don't pull this, because this is, I'm wanting to keep that folded over effect there. I can pull a few maybe here, but light first. And if you find if your lights are getting too dirty because your brush is dirty, just wipe your brush off. I don't mind the amount of pink I am getting there, so I'm good with that. But if you're getting too pink and you're losing your lights, just wipe your brush. Okay, I like that. That's not bad. I'm gonna moisten the center quickly. Just kind of using a dotting motion right now. Okay, I'm losing my little stamen, all that. I can always come in and add that after. I'm losing stuff in the middle there. Looks a bit odd, but okay, let's go into these leaves and just quickly wet them. And I'm starting in the lights. Yeah, things are pretty vibrant green, but my guess is that there's people who like that color. It's kind of weird because I've got a kind of a weird blend now of greens. This is where I'm thinking probably would be good to just throw a little bit more green this way. You could use either the number 5 or the, what's the other one? 38. You could use either. I'm just going to drop some of the 5 in after I've gone ahead and wet the whole thing, And I'm not even really paying a lot of attention to the light versus dark side because I'm just going to come in with this color and fill it dark in after, because it was a little bit weird looking. It was just like too bright, and okay, my paintbrush could have had a little wipe there, but anyways, all that to say, everything was too bright, and the contrast between the two colors was kind of just too extreme. Okay, should I wipe my brush? Yeah, I'll wipe my brush quick. And throw a little bit of this in. And last one, come up here. All right, good enough. I kind of, this is optional. I kind of am not liking how pale my rose is, so I might just come in with a little bit more of this mauve color, wiping my brush, trying to get that green off. And everything's wet, so I'm just going to come in and just drop this in a few spots. And again, I'm kind of stroking downwards with it so that I have a little bit of that, you know, direction, creases, lines, folds that are in the petals. I talk about this all the time, so it's old news. But doing it with a different medium. Okay, yeah, I like that better. It's just a little more intense. I might throw in my brown. So this was the, oh, did I say the number of that one? 61, that was the mauve color. And this is 73. And if you prefer me to just give them names, like call them brown and dark pink, that's good with me. I'd actually like to know. Okay, I think that's better. So I'm just doing it more or less on one side of there. I'm going to lift a little bit out of the center, but I'm happier with kind of how I think it's looking. It's got a little bit more life. Okay, last one. We have to go back to our sketchbook. And there's our rose. I guess if you wanted to see me filling that in, I could quickly finish filling the leaves in, since this was the way we originally drew it. I'm just filling it in with water. And I'm squeezing my brush, and I am actually being a little more conscious this time of starting in the light side and working my way to the dark side. And once I get my brush too dirty, I will wipe it. I don't have to finish this rose, but I thought, oh, why not? Just be careful, because there I go, running off the page. Or I should say running off the camera. All right, let's move on to these clovers. And yes, I don't like how bright that is. I would probably lift that out. If you find things like this that you don't like, they're just way too bright, way too much pigment, just lift them. You can always throw a little bit of the limey green on your brush as well. But let's move on. Okay. I'm going to go in and just, again, I'm just dotting this a little bit with my brush. How much water you allow is up to you. I'm kind of moving in the direction of these, so I'm not just smearing it around in all random directions, but these are kind of pretty. I actually think, you know what would look even prettier? I'm going to go ahead and wet the centers, these little green parts too, and like let that blend up a little bit. I think that'd be prettier. You could even have added a little bit of yellow, but I just like that, even just letting that kind of lime green mingle with our pinks is pretty. So I'm starting on the pinks, and then maybe a good idea to wipe my brush here and there. Starting in the pinks, but then I'm just kind of working my way into the green and letting that, like almost pulling that green back into the pink a little bit, so that we have, you know, Clover has that kind of, I don't know. Sometimes some Clover almost have a little bit of a multicolor look, don't they? Okay, let's wet the center, or the leaves now, and these little stems, and I think we're almost done. And then I guess I should add, if you have any of your pieces that you feel like you've maybe over wet, or you've lost the values, you've lost the shapes, the texture. You can come in when it's thoroughly dry, so you don't want to do this while it's wet. You can come in and just kind of repeat the steps. Just throw a little bit more of these little petals on here, and then you can re-wet them if you want, or you can even leave them as is. So you could just go in, fill it, and let that looks gorgeous just as it is, doesn't it? Because you've got the kind of the wet underpainting, or well, what was wet underpainting there, and then you've got the texture on top. That's beautiful. Or if you decided, you know what, I want to still have that wet look, you can come in again and just throw that little bit of water, and you're going to be able to create more depth because you've got more than one layer. But this is a gentle way of adding layers to a thinner paper. So there's another option. Definitely you can go around all of your flowers and add those if you want to. Or even pulling darker colors in. So in this case, I'm throwing a little bit of brown. I'm not sure if I'm going to like that, so I'm going to doing a combination of oranges and browns. But the brown is going to give me a little bit more of a neutral color. That was number 73, and it's going to give me a little bit more of a neutral color compared to just using the red, but that's a totally optional step. I'm putting a little bit more darks kind of along the outside edges of these clover, just so I can kind of intensify their values. But again, the soft look is really pretty too. So here I go messing with more of my greens. When I go to re-wet it, I'm starting in the lights, I'm dragging into the darks. If you're wanting to see some more things about watercolor pencils, you can watch my coloring page. That one will give you a little bit of information on ways you can use them, but then also the tips that I have for traveling, because I think those might be helpful for you and help you come up with creative ways to use watercolor pencils this summer. All right, so that brings us to the end of our wildflower sketches. I hope this tutorial has brought a little taste of God's beauty and peace into your everyday life, and that it's inspired you to go find some beautiful wildflowers in your area to sketch this summer. See you again soon. Bye.